This is the white coat, a symbol associated with being a doctor. So much so, there's a condition called white coat hypertension, where patients come to the hospital or go to clinic and their blood pressure skyrockets when they see doctors wearing white coats. Now, this particular white coat is special to me, even though you'll never see me wearing it. And that's because it was given to me during my first week in medical school as part of something we called the white coat ceremony. There, we donned the white coat, even though we weren't going to be seeing patients for more than a month and we wouldn't be graduating for years in the future. It was important that we wear the symbol of our profession, despite the fact that we're still trainees. Now compare this white coat to this white coat, the long white coat. You see, in my hospital, we differentiated medical students from residents and doctors by the length of the coat. Even though it was important to wear the symbols, it was still important to also differentiate those who had graduated from medical school and those who were still trainees. But I think it's so important that you wear the symbols of your profession even before you graduate. It's important that you all start by faking it before you make it. And that's what today's video is about. My name is Dr. Rich Hilsden, and this is Knife Skills.
One thing patients probably don't want to hear is that their doctors are faking it. Patients want to know that they have reliable and high quality information. Now hear me out. Without a doubt, you can trust your doctors. Even though I'm going to argue that most doctors are faking it until they make it, or at least have faked it until they make it, I believe that you can trust the doctor that's in front of you. As a doctor gets more experience and has more feedback and more training, the more likely the information that they're getting is information that is reliable and high quality. And so pay attention to the experience that your doctor has and their training. Those are really important criteria if you want to know that the information that you're getting from your doctor is accurate. But it is also important that doctors are humans too. And we've all gone through a process where we've had to fake it until we make it. And there's a good and a bad side to that reality of training. None of us were exceptionally skilled or knowledgeable when we started out. We actually had no knowledge. We came from zero. There was absolutely no medical knowledge to a high level of knowledge enough that you can confidently call yourself a doctor, that society gives you that title, that the colleges and the boards have given you an authority to practice. But when we were starting out, there was this element of faking it until you make it. Just how when I put on my white coat and I was expected to look and act like a doctor, that's a huge part of the training. You start acting like your mentors, modeling your mentors to become like them in the future. If you think about it, medical students will come to my clinic to see general surgery patients and trauma patients, and they very often know very little about general surgery or trauma. But they use their medical student skills to take histories, physicals, gather information, and model the behaviors of doctors who have that experience. And over time, those behaviors and skills start to be incorporated into them, and they become more and more like a doctor every single day. And in fact, at some point, they develop the skills enough that we can test them and see, how are you modeling the behaviors of a doctor? Are you acting and looking like a doctor when you're interacting with patients? We get them to write exams. Have you learned the knowledge of a doctor? Have you gathered all that skill and information through your time on the wards? And if you've done that, you'll be allowed now to move on to the next stage in training. And in my case, we would graduate ultimately to the long coat. So faking it until you make it is a huge part of becoming a doctor. But there is a dark side. I'm going to spend a fair bit of time talking about that. It's not that faking it is going to be a problem when you're working within your specialty. You're going to get feedback as a doctor from your patients that you're doing a good job. You're going to get feedback from your colleagues. You're going to be spending time at conferences and communicating with other people in your area, and you're going to learn your skill. One of my colleagues used the term bailiwick to describe that area where you're most confident. The problem is when you're working outside of the area of your maximum confidence. Are you comfortable enough asking for help and asking for questions? Do you know your limitations? If you spend so much time faking it until you make it, you may not have a clear, bright line where your skills begin and your lack of skills start to emerge. So when you fake it until you make it, have you really spent time to figure out what your true scope is, what your true understanding is in the healthcare profession? This can move beyond being a doctor. As someone who's made YouTube videos, there's a lot of talking head doctors out there. I'm just one of them. And some of them will talk about other aspects of life, including investing, for example. And it doesn't surprise me. They've spent some time studying and learning about investing. But even myself personally, I went and did an MBA, which I focused on finance and on investing myself. And I, even with that training, wouldn't feel comfortable giving people advice here on YouTube. There's just so much to that field. And to feel like I would know enough to adequately give advice or share my expertise would be inappropriate. I did a video when I first started a YouTube channel. In fact, this is a great example of faking it until you learn something. When I started, I was completely incompetent when it came to making videos, and my skill level was low, but I knew that if I pretended that I knew what I was doing and I put effort to it and I had some enthusiasm when I created my content, eventually I'd get better and better at it. And I'm proud to say that I'm continuing to improve. In some ways, a YouTube channel is like faking it until you make it. But one of my very first YouTube videos was on the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this concept really is this idea that people with limited knowledge oftentimes feel like they know so much more than they do. And I think doctors are particularly vulnerable to this because doctors have developed such a great expertise. And again, some of that has come from this behavior of faking it until they make it. They might often think that they have skills that are even outside of their area of expertise and think that they have the ability to offer advice in a certain area. And so that's one of the dark sides of faking it until you make it. You don't know your limits. Another issue of this Dunning-Kruger effect is when you're teaching residents or medical students a certain knowledge. I can remember as a medical student and as a resident being taught actually wrong things multiple times. These doctors were so confident that they knew the answer, but really what happened, they had deluded themselves into thinking that they actually knew something that they didn't. Because they thought something, they believed it was true. And that's a huge risk when you're training. And so one of the things I made sure as far as my training was concerned is that I was going to only teach my medical students stuff that I was absolutely sure was true. Lastly, one of the greatest dangers of faking it until you make it is the issue of imposter syndrome. You may think that you've faked it so much that you've somehow fooled people into believing that you're a doctor. You fooled them into the fact that you have this certain skill. But the fact is that we've all gone through that exact same process. If you passed your exams, you've made it through your rotations, you've been given the title, you have actually made it. You may feel that you have faked it up until that point, but you truly have been given that authority. You're just like the rest of us. It's very easy for people to feel this feeling of imposter syndrome because part of this process of becoming a doctor or becoming a medical professional is that pulling yourself up through the bootstraps, is that energy that you put into copying those people and copying the behaviors of those that are your mentors or have gone before you. So the feeling of imposter syndrome is natural, and it's part of truly the culture and the training that goes on to become a medical doctor. And that's where I'm going to conclude this video, because I made a video before about imposter syndrome. So why don't you check that down below here on the right, where I talk about that feeling of imposter syndrome and how it's normal and common. And I do think part of this fake it until you make it is one of the reasons why imposter syndrome is common. Lastly, another video below is a video where I talk about quitting in medicine. There's many people who might feel that they don't belong. And I know a lot of my medical students are watching this, and people who are interested in medicine are watching this. And I think this is a great video for you to check out as well. As always, I appreciate every single comment below, every single like and subscribe. If you have any comments about this fake it till you make it culture, please make a comment as well. If you think it's a good idea, if you think it's a bad idea, if you think there's a better way to do it, how else should we communicate with medical students who are in that process of modeling medical behaviors? Once again, my name is Dr. Hillston, and thanks for watching.